I Teach series. I'm Larissa Kamines. I'm one of the instructional designers here at the Department of Distance Learning. We're super excited to kick off our This Is How I Teach series with the awesome, the wonderful, the fantastic Dr. Tamara Hunt, and she's going to talk about gaming in the online classroom. Also wanted to put in a plug some of the papers that I passed out to you whenever you walked in the door. The first paper is all the other This Is How I Teach series. The next one's going to be on a Thursday at the end of this month, talking about problem solving in an online classroom. And we'll be sending out some notification emails for those as well, coming up here in the next couple of weeks. The next flyer is we are having what's called a tech tool time, kind of an open lab time for you to come into this room in our department. If you have any questions, maybe regarding what Tamara speaks today or anything about your online class, just come in. Or, you're welcome to come to our office anytime. We want to set aside some other times for you just to come in. Walter and Shannon from Blackboard team will be here on the first couple days listing from the Blackboard interface design, and there's a series of other things going on there. And then the last form is just a survey form. This is not for tomorrow's purpose, this is for our purpose, so that way we can better serve you, those who are willing to teach or are teaching online. So without further ado, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. You give me a reason for going and looking online for games and playing them so I can share them with you. I actually started thinking about using games in the classroom over a year ago when I was the advisor for an MA thesis on using games to teach history. A student who had taken a graduate course of mine went on to do her MA thesis on that. And she talked about the pros and cons of using it and what was available. And a lot of the games that she was using are these very elaborate civilizations types of games. And I thought, I don't have time to do those kinds of things in my classroom. But on the other hand, I really want to get the students engaged in the material. And I don't think there's anything wrong with letting them have fun while doing that. So I started to look for games that I could use, and the very first one that I used was one called Fortuna. And I advise you all to go to this site. And by the way, anybody who would like me to send you this PowerPoint so that you have the links to all of the sites I'm going to mention here, just shoot me an email and I'll send you the PowerPoint and it'll have all the links. I found this by accident and it is the most fun thing, and this was the first game that I used in the classroom. This is from the Open University in England, and we'll see if we can link to it. What I did with this game is I gave the students the link and I said, okay, I want you to play it. And that's all I did. Now this is for a world history class, 1300 to 1700, and we were right at the time that this game covers. So what they did in the game is they selected a character, carpenter, a woman, a cloth trader, and a merchant. And each of them face different challenges. So you pick whichever one you want to use, and I have to say I picked the woman because I actually know who this is based on. I know the real story of who this is based on. But anyway, they pick a character, and then you're given choices. So in this case, for this character, do you marry the neighbor's daughter or the widow of a carpenter? And the students made their choices. And what I had them do is they played this game. I had them keep track of what their choices were because they were going to need to use that in the second stage of this. So you marry, and she has no money, so you both have to work in order to rent the house and so on and so forth. So there's I'm not going to go any farther with that because you can go in and play on that. But there are things like there's a wheel spinner so that when you have kids, you spin the wheel and it determines how many kids you have and how many survive to adulthood. And so they make certain choices throughout the game. Do you invest in this venture or do you save your money? Do you move or stay where you are even though you're in danger? So I had them take note of the choices that they made. And then, after they recorded their choices, I gave them primary sources that were related to the issues. So I wanted them to read primary sources anyway, but I had them read I had to read a primary source on medicine and treatment for the plague, for example. I had them read a source in which a woman talks about what happened to her after her husband died. And she ends up making a bad second marriage, and she writes about how she regrets it dreadfully. But then, interestingly enough, she says, if I hadn't married this guy and been dependent on him, then I would have been dependent on my children. So there was no possibility. Okay. Then I had every one of them write me a paragraph or two about how this material in the primary sources would have either justified or make them change the choices that they made in the game. And the game only has 4 or 5 choices, so it's not very long. But this was to get them thinking about what factors led people to make the decisions that they did in the 16th and 17th centuries, and how the knowledge of what the conditions were might change the way they made their choices. So that was my first effort at doing a game in the classroom. Now, on this one, this is a fun one. It's also not terribly long. It's called Who Wants to Be a Cotton Millionaire? And I gave this to my students as an ethical question exercise, because in this, you're going to make decisions that would benefit you as the cotton millionaire. But those questions have questionable moral implications, at least from my point of view, and I would think from most people today's point of view. And let me give you an example of that. Okay, one of the choices you have to make after you've built your factory, you have to decide where to build it. And then after you build your factory, you have to decide who to hire. So you can either hire women and children, or you can hire a man. And you get a different response depending on which one you take. And so I've showed you what the 2 responses are here. This is your cotton potential millionaire, and he's got a certain amount of coins a certain amount of wealth that he can spend. And your choices will either increase or decrease your wealth. So if you hire the women and children, this actually says, in case you can't read it, it was perfectly acceptable then for children to work from an early age, and women and children were cheaper than men to employ. They were more flexible and easier to train. And then it says, the businessman has made a savings and loses only 1 stack of money, the expenditure of hiring these people. But then on the other side here, if you hire adult men, the adult men are more skilled in weaving, your cotton weaving. But it also says the men cost more and have a reputation for protesting against new work practices. They are also in demand from other industries. The businessman's stacks of money have been decreased by 2. So it's actually more costly to employ the men. But then we have this question, and I had them think about this not only in terms of morality. Is it a moral decision to have small children working 10-hour days? There's that aspect of it, but then I had them also consider, what are the long-term implications of having women and children work in a factory like this? Because it may mean an immediate increase in money to him, but how is society going to be impacted by that? So I had them play the game, and I raised these moral issues with them, which they then answered in a written response. And it was surprising. Most of the students went bankrupt. They made the wrong choices. Because actually, that's interesting, they were making ethical choices based on how they saw things today, and they went bankrupt. So this was a really interesting point of discussion that we had. Okay, the next one that I'm going to show you, this is where I started to get a bit creative on my own. There were a bunch of games out there that were interesting in what they were doing, but they were too simple. So for example, the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian has this culture quest. And some of these are very, very basic. They're obviously for little kids. But one of the ones that they have for woodlands, in the woodlands section, they actually have a trading game. The Europeans come with certain things they want to buy, and they want to trade certain items to the Native Americans. And I thought, how about if we do this kind of game to get the students thinking about cultural interactions and how those cultural interactions work? So I didn't do it this way, but I used this game as the basis for what I then did. Okay, I divided the class into two groups, and each group had a Blackboard group site to work on. But I think the next time I do this, I'm also going to incorporate Zoom meetings, because I think it would be easier if the students could talk to each other and I could sit there and hear what they were saying with each other. Okay, then I assigned different roles in these societies, and you're going to see the roles that I assigned in just a minute. So the students have different occupations and different statuses in their own society. And then each student individually is going to fill out this chart, because I want them to be thinking about what's important to them at that position in their society. Now you have to understand, they've already done reading about the two societies that we used. So it's not like they're unfamiliar with them. But this is to get them to think more deeply about how these societies operate, what their values are, what their goals are, that kind of thing. So you see the various things. And obviously not all of these are going to apply to every person. In fact, none of them should apply to every person. So now, who are the people? Okay, I gave them a what-if scenario. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this concept, but a couple of historians have suggested that the Chinese actually made it to the Americas in the early 15th century. And in fact, there's been an entire book written on it called 1421, the year that China discovered America. Okay, so I said, all right, to the class, we're going to assume that this happened and that the Chinese, in an alternate history universe, decided that they were going to consider setting up trading relations with the Aztecs. And we chose the Aztecs because they had more information about the Aztecs. So in each group, these were the possible roles. And there's only one emperor, 2 warriors, 2 priests, and depending on how many students there are, there were more of each one of these. Now, when it came time to deciding what the community's goals were, this is how many votes their vote counted for. And this was to get them to think about the people of different status. Now, this was an interesting thing, and this is why I'd like to do it with Zoom. Because if the person who's the emperor wants to do one thing, the other people can join their votes together and force the emperor to make other choices, which I thought was a kind of fun thing. And then the people who are the slaves, I asked them to think separately. They don't have a vote. Is there anything they can do to get their interests paid attention to? So there was a lot of creativity going on this. So their basic decision was who gets to decide what the trade priorities were, and those are based on their goals. Whose goals are the goals of society, which is a topic I have been pursuing for years and years in my own research. Okay, so we got the Aztecs on one hand, and then we have the early Ming Dynasty on the other. And we've got the emperor, again, warriors, scholar officials, skilled artisans. This, by the way, this is such an appropriate illustration of this, because this is actually a painting of men working in silk dyeing, which is painted on porcelain. So the 2 big valuable exports of China, porcelain and silk, are in that very one. Okay, we then have farmers, merchants, and entertainers. And one of the things I pointed out to the students, which I'll point out to you, is that there's a difference in the value, the social status in this one than there was from the Aztecs. The farmers are above the merchants. And the students would have known that because in Confucian ideology, the merchants would have been parasites. Okay. And I struggled with this one because I initially was going to have that be cortisone, and then I thought, no, I don't want anybody to have to suffer the slings and arrows of classmates because they're a cortisone. So I put it in there as entertainers. And it was the same thing here. One emperor, a couple of warriors, a couple of scholars, and then more of these. And they then also have to decide what their trade priorities. So they're doing this together as a group, and they come up with what it is that they want to secure through trade. And then they have to decide what they're going to trade. And I gave them the commodities that they could trade. And over here for the Aztecs, slaves, cocoa beans. This is meant to indicate silver, corn, maize, and believe it or not, feathers, because feathers were incredibly valuable in Aztec society. And then over here on the Chinese side, we've got porcelain, spices. This is actually pepper plant that makes peppercorns. Silk, Chinese lacquerware, and then, hard to explain here. It's like, this is like court dress. And in addition to getting silk, the people that the Chinese traded with really wanted to have the court dress as well, because that was a sign of status. And this particular design, which is a phoenix design, was very high status, so they wanted to have that. So then the groups had to decide, what are we going to offer them in order to get what it is that we want? And they could also offer ideology. So if they wanted to offer, for example, the Aztecs are famous for their calendar. They wanted to that, or irrigation and terracing techniques, or the Chinese want, this is actually interesting. The Chinese group, the group from China, came to the Aztecs in their first round of negotiations and said, we're going to offer you silk and porcelain, and we're also going to offer you our governmental system, which is better than yours. And the reaction of the Aztecs, especially the person who was the monarch, was very interesting. They were, no, we don't want that. So, and that was actually, I think, one of the more interesting interchanges between the students, simply because this idea that they were thinking, we've got this great governmental system with civil service exams and everything, you should have that. And they're like, no, we don't want your government. So anyway, so that's what they then did. And so ultimately, what they did is they had a bartering. They were able to exchange their offers. First offer, a response. Second offer, a response. And then they voted, once again using the number of votes, to conclude the deal or not. And then each individual student wrote about what they learned that was important to understanding history from this exercise. So I think they had a good time with this. So, but like I say, next time I do it, instead of doing it where they're all typing in exchange with each other, I think I want to do a Zoom meeting so that they can actually just talk to each other. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go on to some different sites that may be of interest to you, because I know even though you all are very, very interested in history games, I know that some of you may want to incorporate other kinds of games into your classes. So these are just some sites that might be of interest to you. Sporkle. Have any of you ever heard of Sporkle? Okay, a lot of these game sites are intended for primary and secondary schools, but it's like what I did with the Woodland Indians one. Take what they're doing and adapt it to what you need in the class. So for this one, they've got different categories, and you can go down and look and see what they've got on science. And then there's subcategories. Math is very basic. But, yeah, Walter?
They're all free, or
Yeah, this is free. These are all free.
what's the login stuff then?
Oh, you can join. You can join for free. I didn't join, but you can join, and then they send you updates and things.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So that's that one. Now, this next one, Epic Win. I'm not actually going to click on that one because the website doesn't show you a lot. This one actually costs $1.99 for students to download. And I haven't used this one yet, but I thought this was a really interesting one. Because what it is it's a game that's based on task completion. So if you have a number of steps in a project that the students need to do and you want to make sure they do them in a timely fashion, you can have them sign up for Epic Win. And then they get an avatar, and their avatar gets to build on and get prizes and things and expand and experience new things every time they finish a task. And you can set this up as a competition. Who's going to get through the most levels as quickly, the most quickly that you can. So that one's one that I'm still looking at because the $1.99 download, I'm not sure about that. I suspect most of the students could handle that, but I'm not sure. But the concept sounds good to me. Mankind World Heritage Destinations game. This one is actually a fun one. Sorry you have to look at all of these, but they're such fun. Now I know what you're all going to do in your offices this afternoon. Okay. It's got music and everything. But for this one, this is hard, actually. Okay, now, the student's going to come in, and this is why it's hard. It's hard to get the pin in one place. But you get points for how quickly you do it and how close it is. Okay, now I'm going to show you what it tells you if you're way off. It always says, oops, was that a wild guess? And up here, you have to get so many points to advance to the next level. And this is different every time you play it. So I'm not quite sure how you would actually use this in the classroom because you can't control the places that it's saying, but it is a way for students to understand where various places are in the world and World Heritage sites are. And besides, it's fun. Okay. Traveler IQ Challenge. This one is actually not a bad one if you want the students to understand geography. And we'll see. You can choose what area of the world. The UNESCO Heritage Sites is hard. So this is the same one. You have to find the capitals. And you get points and so on. Now, one of the things you can do with this one, which would work for history or geography, is they give you the embed code down here, but you can set up a Facebook page for your class and have the students share their scores on Facebook, whether you're brave enough to do that or not. So they can play against each other to see who can get the highest score, who can do it most quickly and most accurately. So that's another possibility. And I just play that one for fun. Okay. Oops. I'm not going to go into this one, the Londoner, the history game, but if any of you are interested in 17th century London, this is probably the most complex game that's up here. Because you have a certain amount of money to spend, you have to go and look for a place to live, and what your occupation is, and it's very complex, but it's also a lot of fun. I know that you're not historians, but you might want to check out the Best of History website anyway, because it's got lots and lots of games on it. So all kinds of ancient games, Mummy Maker. A lot of these are for younger kids, but once again, you can get ideas from these about how you might be able to adapt these to your class. Okay, we're going to move on from history now. Yay, no. Okay, there are a number of really interesting sites for things like science and math games, some of which are really quite engaging. This Sci Games, it's basically about the cosmos, but you can build a solar system, play golf with charged particles. I haven't done that one yet. drop a rock on someone. So there are a variety of things that you can do in this. So this might be a fun way to get students engaged in astronomy or understanding cause and effect or all kinds of things like that. I put, yeah.
Go ahead and say what you're going to say. I was just going to comment about it.
Oh, I put this one up here because even though this is almost entirely primary and secondary, it does have algebra, pre-calculus, and geometry. And these are much more along the lines of quizzing, what is this? What does this depict? Where is this type of games? But as a way of students being able to review, go online, do a self-review, that's something that they could do. So, Walter?
I was just going to say that if you scroll back up to the top, then it also has the language arts, science, and social studies, which my kids homeschool, and we actually pay for this, and it keeps like track of everything that they've ever done on IXL and stuff. And of course, my kids are kids, not college students, but still really involved site. And you can set up classrooms and stuff on there.
The reason I picked this one for science is because some of the other areas of the site are really definitely meant for primary and early secondary school. But math did, I think, go into the university realm. Okay, Common Sense Media. Now this is actually a site that will give you reviews. It'll describe the games, it'll give you reviews of them, and what you can do is you can limit it to teens 13 plus. So, Solve the Outbreak. I might actually use that one in a history class because one of my history classes spends a considerable amount of time looking at the Black Death. And I draw connections between the Black Death and Ebola and ask the students to think what the relationship is between what we know about what happened in the past and what's happening today. And so as a result, I think I might have them go in and do this as a way of further understanding disease and its interaction with society. Okay, I have to admit that one of my favorite ones is this Serendip Studio. Have any of you ever seen this before? Look at some of the things that they ask you to do. Chance in life in the world, ambiguous figures, in which what you'll do is you'll look at various ambiguous figures and it has you do various activities with those figures. You know, is that first one a skull or a woman sitting at her dressing table mirror, that type of thing. So just the scope of the things. This is the kind of stuff that you could use in science classes, sociology classes, psychology classes. The Prisoner's Dilemma, if you're familiar with that game. This is where you play against the computer. In the Prisoner's Dilemma, you and somebody else are prisoners, and you have to make decisions. And each decision, you decide whether you're going to side with that other prisoner or you're going to work against the other prisoner. And at the same time, the other prisoner is doing that. Well, the game is playing against you. And so what you do is you see how you make choices in this situation. This is something that political scientists do a lot of. Oops. And then finally, I stuck this one up here, the BBC Climate Challenge, because I just found this one. And I thought that this was a really interesting one because the BBC Climate Challenge connects politics and science. Because the students need to think about how they would solve climate change issues and at the same time not lose their elected office. So this is a game of balancing. How do we do that? So these are just some of the games that and game sites that you can find these games. But here are some takeaways for this. If you decide to use games in your classroom, I'm going to say don't just play the games and go ahead and use them, but then adapt them to your course. Have the students incorporate material that they're reading for the class or assignments that they would be doing, and have them do the games and think about what they've done in the games as part of that assignment. So as you saw earlier, I adapted a particular game, the Woodland Indians one, to my class so that we could learn more about some of the issues involved in first contacts between cultures. I think it's a good idea to challenge the students. Get them to think outside the box, because I don't know about in your classes, but in history classes, students come in with the idea that they're going to memorize things, and then they're going to tell me what they memorized on the tests. But I want them to come out as critical thinkers. I want them to be able to think about questions of what if. If we did this, what would the result be? I mean, I want them to be the kind of person who drives down the road and sees a road that they've never gone on before and say, I wonder where that goes. Let's go see. So that's the kind of thing that I think we really want to do in our classes, is to challenge the students to think about things. And if we have to get them to play a game to do it, then we should be doing that. I think we should require the students to do reflection. So whenever they play a game, they should be thinking about reflections. For example, just a little example here. I want the students, for example, in my Africa class to understand the geography of Africa. First thing, it's not a country, it's a continent. But then what I'll do is I'll have them do the online games of locating places and countries and cities. But then what I'll do is I'll ask them to think, you're going to chart an overland vacation in the 18th century. How are you going to do that? What are the challenges you're going to have to face? What physical, topographical features are going to be a problem for you? That kind of thing. And finally, to really engage the students in learning. I hate to say make it fun, but yeah, I'm willing to make it fun if it's also going to teach them something about it. And I have to admit that from some of the students, I've gotten some very positive feedback on some of these things that I've tried, because I actually had a student write in an evaluation, I never liked history, but you really made it fun. And I think they learned something. In fact, I'm sure they did, because of the amount of work that they did. They certainly learned something. So basically, these are some of the things that I would recommend when you go to use games in the classroom. I think it's a perfectly legitimate strategy to use, as long as it challenges the students. It's okay if it's a kind of juvenile game. Fortuna is not sophisticated, but you can make it that way by adapting it to your class. So, I'm sorry, that's basically all I've got. So, any questions? Anything you'd like me to? Megan?
Go ahead. How do you find the games for the different things you're trying? How do you search for them?
For the history ones, I already knew that from history sites. But for the things like the science ones, I just did a Google search for science interactive games. And all kinds of things came up. And a lot of them will not be things that you'll want to use, but very often you'll find sites like some of the ones I found that will give you links to other sites and give you recommendations. So, yeah.
Have you ever thought of developing your own game?
I don't have the computer skills.
Working with someone in computer science?
Well, actually, I have to tell you, my husband and I are both historians, and when we were in graduate school in the 1980s, we spent a lot of time at Goose Island Pub in Chicago talking about drinking craft beer and talking about how we would develop a history game. And you know what? It would have been something like Fortuna. And we were thinking of it even back then, but we didn't have the ability to do it. And at that time, the computers, I mean, we had a Commodore 64, for God's sake, you know. But this is something that's been in the back of my mind for a long time. to put the students in situations where they have to make choices and decisions based on what they know. On one of these sites, I think it was Sporkle, I went into the anatomy section of it, and I scored a 7 out of 10 on the heart. Wow, you know, it's just kind of fun stuff. But yeah, if in my off hours, if I ever had time, that would be really interesting to do, is to develop the kind of games that I'm talking about, because it would make my life a little bit easier if it was all set up and would run automatically. Yeah, Angie?
How long have you been incorporating the games?
This is only my second year of doing it. So. Thank you.
It seems like you have a very complete curriculum that designed it around these games, because you involve with not just the play the game, but doing the reflections and all that. Can you talk about how you integrate that into your assessment design in terms of points and and other activities?
Okay, for the O Fortuna, when they did that one, there were no points associated with anything except the written part at the end. For the much more elaborate trading game, they got 5 points for making sure that they contributed by the deadline. And that game took a bit longer to do because I had to give them enough time to get back with each other. But the big amount of points, the larger, I should say, amount of points, is always going to be on that final reflection paper. Because I want them to have learned something and show me that they've learned something from doing it.
Do you give some sort of criteria for them to write in a reflection, or just pretty much open?
Well, actually, the way I pose the question, I tell them, I want you to do this. For example, you might want to explore X, Y, and Z, or A, B, and C. So I give them suggestions on what approach to take.
I guess I have a comment and then a question to follow up. I think what I really appreciate too is the time. Like, this doesn't take that much time for the students to complete these assignments. And so I guess, you can take as much time as you want. So with the trading activity where they had to communicate with each other about what time span did that take from your class? Was that about a week? Was that all semester? I mean,
It was just over a week.
Okay.
Because I set my online classes up as if they had regular class meeting days, and I usually use it as a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. So by the Monday class they had to do this, by the Wednesday class they had to do this, by the Friday class they had to do this. And scheduling it that way, I think, helps the students stay on track, because when I used to teach courses and I'd give them assignments for the week, every last one of them would wait until Sunday night when everything was due before they'd ever start to look at the lectures or any of the readings. And so by spacing the work out and saying do it on these days, even if they don't do them on these days, the bulk of them will. And by giving them assignments on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, it helps keep them on track. And they're low points things so that if they miss something, it's not going to utterly destroy their grade, but it's enough to give them incentive to get it done on time.
Do you feel like incorporating the games, is that kind of pulling the students in? Do you see more engagement from them?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I have gotten, some of the students are now sending me email messages completely separate from this, saying, I really liked this game and I never thought about this before, but this made me think about this in a different way. And this is completely unsolicited. But they want to share with me because they got so excited about what they learned that they're going to send me an email and tell me about it. And I always say, oh, this is so great. Thank you for telling me, because I always want to hear when you have fun with class, Anything else? Yeah.
Because every course may have a different kind of term, like 16 weeks, 8 weeks, and 4 weeks. What kind of suggestion you will provide to other faculty, if they are teaching shorter terms but still want to add some fun? Like, what kind of tips and tricks that you can offer them to make sure they have fun, but at the same time also be able to cover?
Well, in a shorter class like an 8-week class, I'd use a game that was like O Fortuna, which it takes them less than 10 minutes to play. And then the assignment that goes with it, it would be readings that I would have them do anyway. So they're doing the readings that they would have done anyway, and then the only extra thing is the reflection paper. And you can make that as simple or as complex, because for example, if I wanted to make it complex, I'd ask them to actually refer to specific things in the documents that would have influenced how they made their choices in the game. So otherwise, it can just be a reflection on what they learned about the 17th century. I mean, one thing that they should always learn about the 17th century is you always marry for money. Do not marry for love, marry for money. Anything else?
Okay, well, thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you all for listening. And I want to repeat that if any of you do want these links, send me an email and I'll send you the
Oh,
PowerPoint.
you can send it to us and we can send it to everybody here.
Okay,
That
all
would be
right.
great.
Okay, I'll do that.
Great.
Okay, there is one last paper that I'm gonna ask you to fill out. It's just, again, it's for us. That way we know how to better support you and other questions that you may have based on what Dr. Hunt has gone over. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you in a couple weeks for our next This Is How I Teach presentation. And again, stop by our office anytime if you have any questions, or call us, email us. We'll be there.